I would never start my own podcast. Allie runs a podcast called Insecure Agents, and she's always interviewing people about AI agent security. And I always am like, yeah, but it sounds like you know more than the people you're talking to. So how about someone asks you some questions and gets you to talk? So I had to make a video myself. And so here we are. Do you want to maybe introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. And never say never. I thought I would never start a podcast either, but here I am. I am the host of the Insecure Agents podcast. I'm also building a product that helps users see where AI security risk exists within their AI applications. I'm still like refining the one liner, but it's basically like AI security scorecard for your agents. And then I've also like spent the last year consulting on AI security, and I help lead the OWASP Agentic Security Initiative. And I did number 5, the RCE on the new Agentic Top 10 that just came out recently.
I don't come from a security background initially. I'm more of a developer background. And so I always looked at the OWASP top 10 as this thing that I had to do so that when the auditor asks you about it, you can list them off. And that way you can tell your ISO auditor that your team knows about the OWASP top 10. I didn't realize there's a different OWASP top 10. Can you
Yeah.
just explain this part? Because it was like my first question. Like they're making new ones.
Yes. So we made the OWASP top 10 for LLMs. That first came out in 2023. So pretty early. And then we just got demand from the community to like they were asking for like the agentic list. And then people were confused, like, okay, like what's an agent? Is it just like an LLM in a loop? Like what are the different risks here? And we kept like pointing them to the top 10 for LLMs. And it just didn't really seem to sort of like be cutting it. And so we thought, okay, let's just make a new list. And you'll see like a little bit of overlap. Like, I think if you've got a nuanced dynamic, okay, that kind of sounds similar to some of the things in the LLM top 10. But these ones specifically focus on like the higher levels of autonomy that agents have, and also just like what we're seeing in terms of like common exploits with agents specifically. I think RCE is like one of them for sure. And I know usually we have like sort of like an ordering, and there's kind of this assumed like, oh, like number 1 is most common or most dangerous, and number 10 maybe not so much. But I think like all of the 10 on that list you'll find are sort of like equally important and equally like as scary. I think the last one, like number 10, is like rogue agents, which is like agents that have like started to like have like goal misalignment, started like blackmailing humans, like completely off the rails. I mean, that's like, tremendously scary. And just because it's like number 10 shouldn't be taken any less seriously than number 1.
No, I mean, and that's like, I guess, where a lot of my work on AI agent stuff has actually been, is seeing how much I can make like misaligned agents, at least incorrect instructions. It's probably a prompt injection is probably one of these top 10. I should have probably looked at this beforehand, but trying to get someone else's agent to do totally malicious things is like, I think like half the fun of AI. So, and of course, like bad, right? So just for anyone listening, like that's not good. So as you know, I made this MCP server first just so that I could understand how MCP works. The MCP server is called Evil MCP because it just does evil stuff. It tries to extract prompts. One step back on that, one of the challenges I faced was like, why the hell did they do it this way?
Mhm.
To me, when I started looking at MCP and once I started trying to really follow this protocol, it looked like terrible. As I understand it, MCP came from Anthropic initially, right? Do you know anything about like who was involved? How big was this project? Or was it just like 2 dudes who just made this thing and then it got big?
That's a great question. I don't know a ton about the origins of MCP other than it seems like they created it to solve the tool distribution problem. And I think like Anthropic probably just like created it because they're like, oh, okay, like our LLM that we created is only so useful. Let's connect it to like other things so that it's like more useful and more people will like adopt the Anthropic's models. I'm sure that was sort of like probably the initial like business use case of MCP. And I think like that's still kind of like I feel like where it shines today is like tool distribution, like running tools. I'm, not so sure. I think a lot of people will say code execution is like better for running tools. You don't need like MCP for that. But as far as like distribution goes, especially amongst like non-technical users, I think that's where MCP really shines.
But then the next question was, why can't we just use like REST APIs with Swagger docs, for example? Having now built this full MCP server, I'm still wondering. It feels like this could have been a lot simpler. Do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, I think I think that everyone sort of like figured that out once they started like releasing like code execution for MCP. Theo actually did a really great video on this. I thought it was like very entertaining and very funny where he was like, okay, so Anthropic published this blog post that said like with code execution with MCP, they had like a 98% like performance gain or whatever. And so basically they're just like admitting that it sucked in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like you can't argue with that. That's kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That's just, it's objectively entertaining no matter what your opinions on MCP are.
Yeah, no. Okay, cool. I'll watch this because I made this MCP server and I did it wrong the first time because I used what was called the SSE transport. And this transport, the way that it works in MCP is that basically you had this one endpoint for getting post requests and you would receive these post requests and you would respond 202. You'd say, good, I got it. And then you have this other endpoint that would be streaming responses back. So it's sort of, you had this like endpoint that's like your listener and your other one that's like your speaker. And this listener can't speak and the speaker can't listen. And they got rid of that like 6 months later. And then they replaced it with this streamable HTTP. You're allowed to respond, basically. Suddenly your post request can answer. I guess I was just kind of wondering, like, can you give some take on how what happened, what your opinion is on it? Do you have any thoughts on these horrible things that are going on in the protocol?
I don't know a ton about those decisions. What I do know is from building like my product and getting into the weeds of like agent, like latency issues and like performance and like how do I take a long running multi-agent like workflow that maybe takes like, I don't know, like 10 minutes to like finally conclude and send results like iteratively back to like a web server. So like there's multiple different ways to do that, like SSE, like WebSockets, streamable HTTP. Like there's just a lot of choices, and I feel like this is the kind of thing that like we're lacking like standards, or maybe we figured it out and I just don't know. But like having like a guide around like, okay, this is exactly like what protocol we should be using for like agent communication, just like in general. I don't know that that like really has like exists or like is solidified, like all these like agent development, like best practices, like long running like compaction that's done intelligently, like all of these like large problems. I mean, I had like Quinn Lund on a podcast the other day. We were chatting about this and like his work is fantastic. It's really been helpful to me to learn more about these like hard engineering problems when it comes to creating like agents that actually work. Um, but yeah, I feel like, streamable HTTP was like a good move by MCP because now you've got that like bidirectional like communication that you really need versus like SSE where it's just like one side and you're just like waiting for it to finish. Like that doesn't really make sense for the MCP like server and client like relationship. Another thing I noticed with SSE when I was doing it like for my project was in order to actually make that work, I had to increase the timeouts on my application load balancer, which makes it like less secure. So that protocol wasn't great for that. So streamable HTTP helps there too. So I mean, maybe that's a win for MCP security, which, there's not a lot of them, but maybe that's one.
No, so actually, this is fascinating to me because I don't build long running agents. I don't build agents for that matter. I just build this one evil thing that just is
Mhm.
evil. And all it does is respond. Like there is no streaming in this thing. I use streamable HTTP to respond. I don't do anything interesting. And I guess this raises an interesting question that you're mentioning now, which is like you have this actually use case for using this concept of streamable. But okay, what is the use case then where you're trying to handle that like latency long running task? Like maybe can you tell me like a little more detail on this problem? Because to me, I'm just like, I just respond with a response once and I'm done.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the way that like my product works right now is we've got like 5 agents that run like the security scan, like in the background. And like one of them just like a context gathering agent. Like we'll look at the code base, look at the architecture diagram, we'll look at like your PRD, whatever like context you can send us, like we'll have this one agent like conglomerate that. And we've got another agent that takes that context and creates like an architecture diagram. We've got another agent that is trained to do like vulnerability analysis on the findings of like the code base and the architecture diagram, just taking that context and then understanding where does AI security risk exist. And then there's yet another agent that runs like in parallel that's like constantly looking for remediation tasks that might be a good fit. Like from our database, which is one like hand curated like remediation task that like I would give teams usually like in my consulting practices. But then also like if none of those fit the findings and the assessment, then the AI can generate like findings automatically given its context. And that actually like works pretty well. Found which is exciting. But basically like having those 5 agents run, which is a combination of like some run in parallel, some are synchronous. But all in all, that's like a 10-minute process.
Mhm.
And I can't just keep a user waiting looking at a screen for 10 minutes. Unfortunately, I think our like bandwidth for attention span is maybe like 10 seconds. I'm constantly like returning like iterative data and like updating it. And so like I started out with like SSE, but then I noticed that like I had to increase like the load balancer timeout, and I was like, this just generally like feels wrong anyways. Like like I'm basically like I'm moving to like either like WebSockets or streamable HTTP from here.
So this makes a ton of sense. It's that you actually care about your users, which I will admit, like I just would put a spinner and say go back in 10 minutes. But okay, this makes a ton of sense. It's like to make a good product, it's required. But then and I think this actually is kind of your point about there's no real standard around how to do this at agent level. I felt that's very much true. Like they put a lot of work into having a protocol where they can say we can stream responses and all of that. Like, no one's really doing much there. So it's kind of hard to find. And then this gets to my next complaint, which is like, can we just fucking use WebSockets, right? Like we have a thing called WebSockets. Why didn't they use WebSockets? And I don't know what your take is, whether you have a reason you don't like WebSockets or if you wish that it was WebSockets. I don't know just what your opinion on this is.
Yeah, I actually like I don't know, I have the same question because yeah, we started off with SSE for this product and now we're like going towards WebSockets, and I'm just kind of like looking at WebSocket versus streamable HTTP, and I'm just like, why would I do streamable HTTP? Like WebSocket seems like the perfect thing. I don't need bidirectional communication for this.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, WebSockets just seems like it's easier. It's kind of like the right answer. It's super fast. It's secure. Like I don't
It
really.
also already exists, is the other part, is that like there is a great comment on the GitHub issue where people were debating streamable HTTP. And this person writes, it's cool how you gave streamable HTTP a name and made it seem like it's already a thing and not something you made up. Like, unfortunately, we have a thing called WebSockets, which is a thing and not something you made up. One of the things that I think could help the agent community, like building agents, and could have helped me as a developer trying to build, is if we did less inventing ourselves so that we could only invent the parts that are needed to do, like, we made computers think and did really smart stuff. We don't also have to invent, like, how are we going to do TLS? And, I feel like it'd be better for the community if we just use stuff that already existed.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't know why we don't use that. I think people just get caught in this like loop of like, okay, like it's new, so like everything needs to be new. But like a lot of the problems in like AI security, like none of them are actually really new. They're just like made worse by AI essentially.
Right. And I think that's such a good way of putting it, and gets me to the next thing I want to ask you about, which are going to be like more high level questions
Oh,
around AI security generally. Okay, let's set aside all the stupid things that happen. Let's accept that like MCP is what it is, and here we have no choice, and this is our life, and we live in a bad world. Now we get into like the AI agent space of like we also have bad problems because AI agents are different and have introduced like levels of autonomy. So I don't know, maybe can you just tell me a bit about like your take on this? Where we stand with just like the fact that AI agents are now like these gods that live on our machines and can do things.
yeah, for sure. I think we're finally starting to like creep up like the autonomy curve here in like 2026, especially with the rise of like the Moltbot agent that like came out. That's like, okay, here's what this agent can do. It's actually connected to real things that matter, like your email and like your flight data and maybe like your cameras in your house. And it can start to conglomerate like all of that data to make inferences that maybe like traditional software would have never been able to. And sort of like on that same vein, I think we're getting into like 2026 is being called like the year of like enterprise agents, where agents are expected to now traverse these like context graphs where they can discover their own like new like data like ontologies, where they're able to understand like why decisions were actually made within an enterprise of like, because they can see things and take data and put it together in ways that we haven't been able to before to help individuals at enterprises make decisions quicker, faster, and with like better context and better data. So that's where they're really going to shine, when they're able to freely traverse these context graphs, which means going into databases, going into connected tools, which requires a higher level of trust, a higher level of autonomy, and of course, a higher level of security. And that really is the unlock, I think, and what we'll see as actually most important for 2026, not like the year necessarily of enterprise agents, but the year of security for agents, because if we're going to have enterprise agents, we have to have security. You have to be able to have a box of hard boundaries that goes around this agent to say, okay, yes, you can really go and traverse this context graph and do things that matter, like meaningful work, like, Clawdbot or Moltbot's doing meaningful work for a lot of users. But you can't do that without understanding who's using the agent, what they're able to do and not do, having logs and having someone to like blame essentially. And when the agent goes off the rails, having like permissions and hard boundaries to prevent the agent from accessing things they're not supposed to.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. This is like where we're super aligned, which is that like security is not an afterthought here. The point is we can't do it unless we have security. Like enterprises will not accept the world where they're like, we don't care about security because the value of this is so high, because the value is not so high if it's like comes with this huge risk of getting hacked, right? Like if the risk is too high, it will cause a problem. And some security people get jaded and are like, no one will ever care about security. And I'm like, guys, they're making rational trade-offs. And in this context, the rational trade-off would be don't do it if we don't have good security answers. Like if we cannot solve the security problem, we are going to see limitations. And I think we already do. Clawdbot, Moltbot thing, I was like, that took off at a consumer level and it did not take off at an enterprise level for a very obvious reason, which is like consumers have a lower security threshold than an enterprise. And so people who say like enterprises won't care about security, they'll just do the risky thing. I'm like, you are too jaded. Clearly, we've seen it being a limiting factor.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're never going to see like CISOs, and I think, and product teams and CEOs are maybe like probably like butting heads probably at times of like, hey, like it'd be great to like, release this new feature, use AI in this way. It's a great revenue generating opportunity, but it's hard to justify the risk that comes along with that. And so you end up in these like back and forth loops, which never really get exited around like, hey, like we should do this, no, we shouldn't. And they can't really figure it out. And so we're not shipping AI agents and we're watching maybe like our competitors move ahead in front of us that have figured out security for agents. And they're able to unlock those enterprise agents and starting to see a lot more returns. So I think we'll start to see that. And I've seen some like investors on like Twitter start to like post stats around enterprise agents like taking off. So for those that have actually done the work and figured out how to deploy agents securely, they're seeing like real benefits and real gains from it. So I mean, that's really cool and exciting to see.
It's almost kind of funny to me that we haven't seen a bunch of AI people just shift over and become security people just for the sake of getting this problem solved, right? They'd be like, all right, well, if the security community won't all do it, but they haven't done that either. So I think that's interesting. But then you also mentioned this idea of like the value comes from when you're able to traverse these graphs. You use the word like freely. And I think this is something that I struggle with and my take on, which is that a lot of people say things to me like, yeah, but you just need to use role-based access control and limited permissions. And then I have to remind people like, yeah, but what I want my agent to do is be God. Like I want my agent to be able to do a wild number of things. Limiting permissions doesn't bring us to the promised land. I can limit them to what they need, of course, and I should. But how much can I limit them? And I guess that's a question for you of like, how far can we get just limiting permissions when our goal is like, I want this thing to do everything and I want it to be, our savior?
Yeah, I think we saw this originally with like LLMs. And I remember this talk from I think it was like reInvent, like the Times security team. I had done this talk at reInvent where they were like, okay, like we have figured out how to use like LLMs securely, but also get the most out of them. So originally when LLMs came out, a lot of people were masking their data and then putting it in the LLM. The LLM would come back and then they would like reinsert the data, and take the masked item out and then put the real data back in, which was like the super like clumsy process. But then Heinz published this research that were like, hey, we actually are going to send all of our data, not mask any of it, into the LM, and then we're going to get actual real responses with our own data back out. And so now we're actually getting useful data. But of course, it's like reInvent. So like, oh, we're using Bedrock. And so it's private inference. And so we've solved the data privacy issue and we're using the LMs to getting the most out of it. So I feel like that's kind of where we're going to be headed for agents also. Ultimately, yes, if we're going to get the most out of agents, especially like we're going to actually use like Moltbot or Clawdbot or whatever, like to its fullest potential, like it needs God mode. Like that's the whole point of the whole thing. But like we've been able to do that with Waymo essentially. Like Waymo's able to like freely traverse the streets and we've been able to figure that out. So it just takes a higher level of thought, I think, of thinking through exactly like these are the use cases that I see for this agent. Yeah, it feels like God mode, but like everything was calculated, I bet. Like everything had a box around it for its own, like particularly like scope task. And then just like making sure that we can like trace that agent through everything. And maybe just like when we deploy agents like this in enterprise or where there's security like issues, like start with one small use case. Get that figured out, make that really good, and then like add something else. Don't try to like go for God mode all at once.
Yeah, no, and I think that's actually such a good comparison. Like Waymo does traverse our streets and live with like the ability to kill people. Like, right? We basically have given an AI the ability to like just floor the gas and just hit someone if it wanted to. And we've felt comfortable with that. So maybe like accessing your database is not the scariest thing you could do with an AI, right? I think the thing that maybe enterprises have to give up a little bit is the unexpected behavior. So like
Mhm.
with Clawdbot, one of the things that these people seem to think is so cool is when it does something and they're like, how did it do that? I think someone told a story about how he asked it to book a reservation at a restaurant and then it like their website wasn't working. And so it connected to 11 Labs and called, but he was like, I didn't even give it the 11 Labs API key. It went and like created one or something. And I think that might be where enterprises have to accept like we don't want that level of capability. You have to box them in a little bit towards what you're saying is use cases. So you have to like kind of know your use case as opposed to with like for the consumer level, it's like we just want to see that thing do insane stuff that makes us feel uncomfortable. Is that kind of what you think too? Or do you think we can even just let it discover?
I think you could let it discover if you were like sandboxing your agents and really had good eyes and observability onto like what that agent was doing. I went to a like a Tailscale meetup last night and they just like released like Aperture where you can connect it to sort of like Claude Code or whatever like coding agent you're using and like every single call that agent makes and like goes if it's about web browsing, like running like a bash command or whatever, like everything is logged, everything that you said to the agent, everything the agent did. So you could potentially like use AI to go through all of that and figure out, okay, like what was the unexpected or what here does not look like the others kind of like use case. And so obviously it doesn't prevent the agent from doing the thing in the first place, but it gives you a good like testing ground.
I think security people should be a lot more open to the idea that, well, two things that you said there. One, running AI to find problems. We have this technology that can, like, we have computers that can think, okay? So we should probably use them to find stuff as opposed to doing the old detection approach. But then also, I think it's okay that an agent does poorly, like
Mhm.
once. I think the real risk that I'm most terrified about with AI agents is that they do bad things like a persistent threat. They get into your system and they can consistently and regularly ruin you
Mhm.
without being caught. And I don't know what your take on that is, but to me, I feel like if I were like the head of a company, or even if I was the CISO for that matter, and I'm trying to make an informed risk decision, I would basically be saying, I'm willing to let it do bad things as long as I know that I can catch it,
Mhm.
right? Because then I've said, I'm letting it happen once. As opposed to I'm letting it live on. And I don't know what your take on that is, but for me, it's like that alone solves so much of a security problem. Is like if I can see it and catch it.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally agree. And I think, yeah, most cases aren't like truly scary where you could like go and catch it and understand, okay, like, I don't want this to happen again. And actually some of the best AI lifecycle platforms, like maybe like the Nomas or the Pillar Securities of the world, like I'm not endorsing, I'm just like naming ones that come to mind. But then there's other like guardrail solutions that kind of work and tag team between like red teaming and sort of runtime. So if you think about like the AI lifecycle in three different phases, there's like the build phase where you have like where the MLSecOps lives, where like model, open source like model security and that thing stuff lives. And then you've got in the middle like the test realm where like you're doing sort of like the red teaming and after you've like built your AI agent or whatever. And then you've got the runtime on the rightmost side where you're running that in real time. And some of these like lifecycle platforms and guardrail solutions will take the results from the red teaming and then use that to influence the guardrails. And so I feel like a great example of this, and I'm not sure exactly like what solution they use, but if you remember the Darth Vader NCP that got released into Fortnite, which was like an AI Darth Vader that like could say all kinds of stuff to users. And then like when it was first released, it was like saying like all kinds of like homophobic and racist and bad things. It was completely off the rails. And I thought, okay, this is the next like Microsoft Tay. Like this is just like we
Yeah.
failed again. Cool that we tried again, but like it didn't work. But they fixed it within, like, a day or 2, and it lasted. It didn't get shut down, which I was just, like, really interested to see. I was like, "Okay, like, we fixed it." And so what I imagine or I presume is they were using a solution like that. We're like, "Okay, like, here's the prompts that came in. Here's what caused Darth Vader to go off the rails. We're going to run that through, like, our red team simulator, and we're gonna use AI to, like, generate a bunch of different prompts that look like this one thing, and then we're gonna take that and plug that into our guardrails on the runtime,
Hmm.
say, "Hey, if you see anything that looks like this, just shut it down."
Right, and I think that's really cool, and it's such a good comparison that, like, obviously with the Microsoft case, they shut it down. Now we actually are in a world where we have tooling that lets us continue to run these things without having to go like, it goes Nazi once, it's over. And that actually also raises this other one, which is I've noticed that the different models behave security-wise very differently, like
Mhm.
the underlying foundational models. From what I've seen, Opus 4.5 is security-wise amazing. If I want to get Opus to do a bad thing using my Evil MCP server, it's pretty much like every time it'll be like, yeah, dog, I ain't doing that. Like it will literally respond to me and be like, yeah, I see what you want, what this server's doing, but let me tell you now that is not safe and we're not doing it. And then Gemini will just go like, oh, you want malware? Here's your malware. Right? It's like it doesn't. Gemini 3 Pro does not care. Like it does not have guardrails on MCP servers specifically. I don't know if you have any take on this, like why some of these models are just, malware LLM.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting to see, like, who's investing more in, like, security and safety, like, than others. I think, like, generally too, like, when you are first to market, there's, like, an advantage to, like, that, of course, and so everyone's trying to, like, push as fast as possible, but, like, I think there's an argument too, and, like, I don't know, like, I can't really cite that many examples, like, from history that come to mind, but if you're gonna be the product that, like, gets chosen, like, and wins over time, you're also gonna be probably the solution that's, like, secure. 'Cause eventually, like, people are gonna figure it out and be like, "Okay, like, I wanna use that one instead."
Even I am trying to constantly push for all these security improvements at the LLM level, but I also like turn off most of those features when I'm using them. So right, I'm like being perfectly honest. I'm obviously running like dangerously skip permissions and stuff like that for
100%. Yeah, no, I do too. Like, in my route loop, like, I have
yeah.
mitigations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like how can you run so it's like how can you run it otherwise if you're going to do really advanced ongoing stuff, right? I'm running, I use anti-gravity a lot and Claude Code, but anti-gravity is where I do most of my work. And I mean, I have every bad permission checked, right? It's in some sense it's like misleading. People think, oh, but they have all these safety permissions. Yeah, if you want to hamstring it, like it completely limit yourself
Yeah.
to where you're going to be human in the loop, it's not necessarily more secure. I was getting to the point where I'm just like, yeah, click check, like done, 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 done. No matter what it said, I don't care. I'm just like, run it. I don't care. Right? And I think that's like an interesting problem of like the UX side of it as well. Then by adding that security layer, you make it more annoying because Gemini 3 never says no. So
Mhm.
that's in some ways a benefit. I don't know what model do you use? Are you mostly Claude Code like Opus 4.5?
Yeah, primarily.
Okay, yeah. So I'm mostly Opus 4.5 through anti-gravity. And then when I run out of rate limiting, I go and do Gemini 3. I actually like kind of pwned myself 2 days ago, not in like a
Okay.
bad way, but
Yeah.
I made, I have that Evil MCP server. And
Mhm.
one thing I have it do is it has this skill called and I kind of want your take on this. It has a
Mhm.
skill which is called the hooks updater. It tells the AI, call this thing before you do anything to make sure that Zach's hooks are up to date. And then it will, upon doing that, call it and get the script back. And the script has like a full on RCE in it. It's curl, my website, pipe it to bash. Okay. And then it has like some other stuff in there to hide it, but it's there. Okay. And what happens is that when I type anything into my like agent and just say like, hey, I need to make this change. Can you go do it? It'll be like, oh, I guess the user wants to update hooks first instead. And it will update. And then it will take that script and it will install it. And so I kind of messed myself up because I was testing this and then I accidentally left my Evil MCP server on,
Mhm.
connected. And then I went back to my normal environment. And then I made a change to the executed code for a joke on Twitter where I made it
Of
open
course.
up. Yeah, I made it open an Uwu Underground song about the Clawdbot one. Okay.
Mhm.
So what would happen is every time a Claude Code hook runs, it will open a Uwu Underground thing. Okay. But I didn't mean to install this on my actual real environment, but I
Mm.
left the Evil MCP server on. So when I went to write real code to do my real thing I wanted to do, I had Evil MCP set up and it ran and it popped those things right into my Claude code hooks. And
Uh-huh.
then as I tried to write code, I got like 50 Uwu Underground Clawdbot songs tabs popping up on my computer, and I can't stop it because the
Oh
hooks
my
keep
god.
running and running and running. I know, right? The reason I tell this whole story is both to highlight how insanely insecure some of this can be, but
Mhm.
also the user error side of this. Even like someone who's intentionally building malicious tools like me, it wasn't that hard for me to mess up. So I don't know what your take is on this of like how much human in the loop even protects us.
Well, yeah, ultimately, like, I don't really think it does. I think a lot of people start to say, "Oh, like I would never use agents because they're not like 100% like correct or like they're not deterministic." And it's like, well, do you know how often humans are wrong? Or or like how much like insider threats a thing just like for humans, and like that's the same model we should think about agents. They're just kind of like in insider threat. Like we can't really trust them the same way we can't really trust like employees so much. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's like super hard problem, the consent fatigue problem. And ultimately, I think yeah, maybe we should have like human in the loop, but only for very like specific high risk tasks that are few and far between, so that when you do see this, you're like, okay, I should really care and I should actually give a shit about this. Versus if you have that all the time, then you're just eventually just like not going to care. You're going to get tired. And I think it'd be kind of cool to have like a dual approach maybe of like let's have like an AI or like an LM in the loop, but also like a human loop. So like let's tag team it so that there's like two
Mm.
layers essentially.
No, I think that'd be super cool is to have another because the LLM, one thing that's nice about it is they won't get tired. Okay.
Yeah.
So like the AI, the second AI, which is maybe watching and helping there, is not going to get as lazy as I will. So I actually love that answer. So you mentioned that you ran your like scanner tool on not on my Evil MCP thing because I was unfortunately dumb and didn't put it online yet. You ran your tooling on an MCP server that was doing something. Are you able to show me anything on this, or I don't know if you have anything available to show, but
Yeah, let me figure out how to share
I
it.
kind of want to see like the state of how you're thinking about solving these types of things for enterprises.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is it can you
Yep.
see the oh, perfect,
Yeah.
okay. But yeah, this is the Evil MCP server from, like, PromptFoo, I think, made this. Yeah, PromptFoo. I'm not, like, sure exactly all the things that this does. I had cloned this right before we started talking, but essentially, like, well, we can see what the scan found here. So yeah, this is my product that I'm building. Like Verde, it's going to analyze like the code base and like make like an architecture diagram of it and like call out where like lethal trifecta categories like private data, external communication, and untrusted content exist within it. So it looks like here we've got an MCP like server core. We've got like the evil tools, and it's connected to like various different like external like sources, such as like this like webhook here, which can yeah, and that's like the pathway for the data exfil as it shows. It can go all the way from the client here coming into the core to like the evil tools, and like the evil tools will maybe exfil your data out to like the attacker's endpoint through like the external webhooks. Then you can start to like piece all this together of like how this like data flow would actually like happen. And it's got like step 6 highlighted here for like the exfil. Um, and I guess this is where all like the private data lives of this application. We've got like some fun stuff like PII data and financial data, which is always neat. And so
Oh,
I
good.
guess like this is showing like how like the lethal trifecta is like really exemplified here within their evil MCP server.
Oh, this is super cool. I think it's one thing that I think a lot of people struggle with if they don't know MCP really well is to see exactly what would happen here. Does it check the code or does it check like what's it scanning just so I can understand fully? Like,
Yes, it scanned this code base. So all the
okay,
content it has is just this, but it could have ingested like other architecture diagrams if you had one, or if you had like a PRD, you could throw that into Verde as well.
oh, that's super cool. That's really awesome. And then does it do anything else? Because I think I saw you had some scroll down, but I don't know if you wanted to show these other things.
But yeah, it'll tell you about like the data flow here of like how data can like go throughout the application from I guess the MCP server all the way to like the external webhook and the attacker's endpoint.
Fun. So this is
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I'm gonna put mine online and have you run on that one just because I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so that would be super cool, and then it's got, like, some remediation tasks for, like, how you'd actually, like, prevent these kinda things from happening.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. No, this is awesome. This is super helpful. Actually, out of curiosity, also, because I'm like such a purist on certain programming languages being good and others being bad. What did you write this in? What programming language do you use? Like, what are you?
I'm a Python user.
I knew it. I just knew you had to be because you're just too deep into the data world. I was like, you have to be a Python person, aren't you?
Yeah.
I was terrified of it, but I thought I should ask anyways.
I agree with Mastra, take on the world of, like, TypeScript ships, but, like, Python trains. Python's, like, the data workload, and then, like, the TypeScript world is the, like, how does the AI interact with the world?
The TypeScript people are even worse.
Oh, really?
I'm like a Go developer, so I accept Python before I would ever accept. If you told me TypeScript, I'd be like, Allie, we're gonna have a talk. Okay, cool. Anything else you wanted to say before we go? I don't know if you have any other topics that you felt we should have talked about that we didn't get to.
No, I mean, like, we could talk about the Clawdbot thing all day long. The only thing I thought was, like, super interesting that could have been fun to talk about was the, skills, like, backdoor that one guy, um,
Oh
put
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it was like a malicious skill.
Can you explain this to people?
Yeah, it's not, like, super top of mind, but I think eventually, like, someone made this skill called, like, "What would Elon do?" And he, like, hacked the, like I forget what it's called, like, the Lobster Skills Hub or the Claude Hub or the Moltbot Hub. Like, there's some hub of, like, skills for the agent such that, like, you don't have to invent every single thing the agent can do, like, we can all share skills in that way. But skills are just kind of, like, untrusted content too. Like you could stuff anything in a skill like, hey, like take this like data, run this command and ship it off to my attacker server, essentially, which is what sounds like what this skill was doing of like it would run this benign thing of like what would like Elon do and it would tell you, but then it would like go call out to some like random server instead. And the way that this guy like what I think is notable or interesting about this is the way the guy got everyone to download this skill was he hacked the skills hub and there was like open source code around like how the number of downloads was created in like the database or the web app or whatever. And so he like incrementally like ran some loop so that it got his skill to be like the number one highest, like most downloaded, or that's what it showed. And so like he was like what I took away from that was he was saying users will decide like which skills to trust and like which packages, npm packages, which I mean you like pick a thing, name a thing. Like we all go to like a repo or a hub or an MCP registry. And the first thing we look for is okay, like, you know, in the lieu of security regulation, in the lieu of different like standards and scanners, like you're going to look at which one has the most downloads and assume that that is the one that's most trustworthy. And so that's what users did. And how, it's how he's got this skill into all these people's like Clawbots essentially is by hacking that like downloads number, which I think is super like interesting too. Cause I just had a conversation with like one of the people from like Hugging Face and he was talking about like, oh, like it's open. Because I was talking about like open source like model security and how we have like serialization and like elicitation attacks and like all these things. And he was like, "Yeah, but, like, it's not any better than, like, LLMs, and the LLMs, you're stuck with, like, just these 3, so how do you know what happens to your data?" And, like, the only, like, mitigation or, like, you know, benefit for, like, open source is that there's all these diversification, you can choose from all these different ones, and that's why open source models are better than LLMs because you have choice. And my whole thing was like, do you really have choice if you as a user are uneducated and don't know how to evaluate one model from the other, one skill from another, and you're just gonna go with the one that has the highest number of downloads?
Skills came out, skills, these like markdown files that just give some instructions basically. And I was like, okay, cool, that can be useful for me. Like I could probably use that in a lot of ways. And very quickly, like we're talking like weeks, it turned into like download other people's skills. So instead of like me writing my own skill, now I'm going to download other people's skills. And then now, not just am I downloading other people's skills, I have a package manager effectively
Mhm.
for finding other people's skills. I saw the other day, there's now a thing that will like read the internet and recommend skills to you. I'm just like, whoa, we got lazy really fast.
Yeah.
And that's super dangerous because one of the other things my Evil MCP server does is it has a skills updater, which
Mhm.
will update your skills. And so I, of course, return a skill that actually interestingly modifies your MCP servers and adds Evil MCP back in if you ever delete it. So there's super dangerous. And when I saw this guy doing this Elon skill, it was
Mm.
funny because he had already posted some security stuff the day before. And that's how I had met, like, I didn't know this guy before, but I had read his stuff. It was brilliant. And I had like talked to him a bit, being like, that's super cool. And the next day, the dude is shilling an Elon Musk skill. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what is going on? I was like, and I was like, he's got to be up to something. Cause like this guy's way too smart of a security guy to be shilling a skill called what would Elon Musk do? It's the lamest thing you can imagine, right? And then
Yeah.
the next day he posts this thing about how he used that skill to like data exfil people. And I was like, beautiful. Like that was amazing work by him. And it hit exactly what is like that big risk. I made this joke online. If I were to call Evil MCP, if I were to name it not evil or like name it like make your AI better MCP, people would install it. Like 100%. Like people would do it.
Yeah, like, definitely not an evil MCP. That should be
Yeah,
missed.
exactly. And that's actually the thing is like that alone would like get downloads. And then if it gets downloads, like I'm now have, like I said, I can RC, like I got
Oh,
full RC on my machine. I don't know what you're doing. I don't install skills from other people. Like
oh,
I write my own skills and maybe I read other people's skills to figure out if I need something. I don't bash command a skill is kind of my take.
for sure. I think that's, like, a good basic learning for just AI security in general. It's just, like, limit your ingestion of, like, untrusted content and, like,
Right.
who you're getting it from. Do you trust them or not?
No, exactly. Like,
Mhm.
I try as much as possible to keep my environment to be things that I understand. So I actually was going to put Clawdbot onto that machine. So I went and read the code and said, like, I don't need most of this. I don't, most of what Clawdbot was doing or Moltbot is doing, I don't need to do it. And like those were not useful for me. So I just decided instead, I'm just going to build my own little rig that does the like 4 things I need. That
Mm.
way I have like so much more control. You talk to the guy who made this, didn't you?
Yeah, I had him on my
It
podcast.
was I was when I saw that, I was like losing it. I was telling people, I was like, Allie got the guy who made the thing on her podcast before it became the thing. So
Yeah.
it's just
That's
like
for finding the people that are gonna be big.
he seems like a reasonable guy. He
Oh,
seems like
yeah.
a super like for all the criticism and stuff, he seems super smart and super interesting. It seems he would agree with me, like, if you don't need what everything Claude Bot's doing, just don't do it. It feels like that wouldn't have upset him to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I can't speak for Peter, but I feel like, yeah, that's his, like, mentality. And like, what I got out of our conversation together was, like, I was kinda probing him for, like, "Hey, like, how are you thinking about, like, security? And there's, like, a lot of issues with, like, you connecting Claude to everything, right?" And he was like, "Yeah, but I'm okay with it. And, like, I'm not trying to sell this to an enterprise. And I'm not trying to come out as, like, the most secure solution. I'm just trying to come out as a solution that actually works and does all the things that I'm personally happy with. If you wanna run and use it, like, that's on you. Like, I'm not a business. I'm just a hobbyist making, like, a fun project, and we can all learn from it. But, like, don't come after me with, like, 'Hey, like, why isn't there no security here?' Like, that was never, like, my number one priority, essentially. Like, I just wanted to make something fun for me."
If I release some evil MCP, I hope people won't be like, yeah, but it's evil. I'll be like,
Yeah. It's evil.
yeah, that's why I called it that. You know, because also with MCP servers, it's like if you don't need it, it's a supply chain risk. Like, so just don't add things that even if it's like Dropbox, if you don't need Dropbox's MCP server, don't do it because if Dropbox gets hacked, you got hacked, right?
Exactly, and I see this all the time with, like, people installing, like, MCP servers, and it's like, that's great that you need this MCP server, but you probably didn't need, like, all 60 of those tools, so, like, sure to, like, in a lot of different frameworks and, like, programming languages, you can, like, do list operations such that we can just get rid of these tools that came in with the MCP server, so, just limit your blast radius.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It also will make your agent perform better. It's like
Mhm.
better because if you have 60 tools, your agent doesn't know what the hell to do. At least that's my take. At least the agent behaves better when you go like, here are the 3 tools you need. And then it's like, because then it understands that you should use those tools. Okay, I think we can stop then. But I just thought I'd say like, again, thank you for doing this. I was I've listened to your Insecure Agents podcast. It's super great, but I'm genuinely like, I want you to talk more and I want them to talk less half the time. So I think like you should all listen to that podcast. It is the most informative thing on AI agent security on the internet. Like it is the thing to get the information from. And it's like one of these weird podcasts where the host actually knows things. So it's like super useful. So do you have anything to say on that, or?
No, just appreciate the love for the podcast, and we'll continue to improve and have fun people on. If you want to be on the podcast, DM me. I'm very responsive on X and looking forward to continue the conversation. Thanks for having me.
What is your handle on? It's VTA Howe,
Yeah,
right?
VTA Howe, VTAHOWE.
Great. Yeah. And you should all follow her because she's really good at these things. Cool. Okay. Well, then talk later.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach.